Alpha Daniel Sterling is known as the Butcher for a reason. He doesn't save people, he buries them. But deep in the frozen wastelands of Sector 4, beneath 3 feet of solid ice, he found something that made his cold heart skip a beat. An albino omega, suspended in the dark water, left as a chilling sacrifice. She should be dead. In fact, the tag on her wrist says she's property of a lab that doesn't exist. Breaking that ice didn't just save her life, it triggered a war that will burn the werewolf kingdom to the ground. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a survival thriller. Let's get into part 1. The wind on Blackwood Ridge didn't just blow, it bit. It tore through the layers of Kevlar and fur, seeking bone. Daniel Sterling, Alpha of the Obsidian Pack, didn't feel it. Or rather, he chose to ignore it. Standing at 6'4", with a scar running from his jaw to his collarbone, a souvenir from the territorial wars of 2019, he looked out over the expanse of Mirror Lake. It was January in Alaska, and the world was dead. "Alpha!" Theron shouted over the roaring wind. Theron was his beta, a pragmatic man who preferred spreadsheets to bloodshed, though he was good at both. "Thermal scopes are clear. The rogue patrols aren't here. We're wasting time." Daniel narrowed his eyes, his pupils constricting into vertical slits. His wolf, a massive beast of shadow and rage residing in his subconscious, was pacing. Something was wrong. The air smelled of ozone and vanilla? It was faint, sweet, and entirely out of place in this frozen hellscape. "Wait," Daniel commanded, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Theron's chest. Daniel stepped onto the ice. It groaned under his weight. He walked further out, toward the center of the lake where the ice was usually thick enough to drive a truck over. But here, the texture changed. The snow had been swept away, revealing a patch of ice that was unnaturally clear, like a window into the abyss. He looked down, and his heart, a muscle he thought had calcified years ago, skipped a beat. Beneath the surface, suspended in the dark water, was a figure. It was a woman, but she didn't look human. Her skin was the color of moonlight, stark, blinding white. Her hair floated around her face like a halo of spun silk, also white. She was an albino. Even in the dim light, he could see the faint blue veins tracing under her translucent skin. She was curled into a fetal position, eyes closed, looking less like a corpse and more like a sleeping statue carved from marble. "Theron!" Daniel roared, the sound cracking the silence. "Get the axe, now!" Theron slid across the ice, stopping beside his Alpha. When he looked down, he gasped. "Holy hell! Is that a white wolf? I thought they were extinct." "She's not a history lesson. She's a person," Daniel snarled. He didn't wait for the axe. He dropped to his knees, channeled the immense strength of his Alpha bloodline, and smashed his fist into the ice. Crack! Pain shot up his arm, but the ice spiderwebbed. He hit it again, and again. Blood from his knuckles smeared on the white frost. With a final feral shout, he shattered the thick barrier. The water was black and unbelievably cold. Daniel plunged his arms in, the shock of the freeze stealing the air from his lungs. He groped blindly until his fingers tangled in the fabric of a thin, ragged hospital gown. He hauled her up. She was lighter than air, fragile. Her head lolled back against his chest, water cascading off her white lashes. "She's dead, Daniel," Theron said quietly, stepping back. "She has to be. Look at her skin. She's blue at the lips." Daniel ignored him. He stripped off his heavy fur-lined tactical coat and wrapped it around the small, soaked body. He pressed his ear to her chest. The wind howled around them, trying to drown out everything. But Daniel focused. He shut out the cold, the danger, the logic. Thump. It was faint, so faint it might have been a ghost tapping on the walls of her ribs. Thump. "Start the truck," Daniel ordered, standing up with the girl in his arms. She felt like a block of ice against his chest, her core temperature critically low. "Daniel, think about this," Theron argued, chasing after him as he strode toward the shoreline. An albino omega found in the territory of the Cross family. This smells like a trap. Dominic Cross doesn't just lose people. If we take her, we are declaring war. Daniel stopped at the edge of the snowbank. He looked down at the girl. Even frozen and dying, there was a pull, a magnetic snap in the air that made his wolf howl in possessive fury. "If Dominic Cross put her in there," Daniel said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, "then I'm going to peel the skin off his back. Start the damn truck, Theron." Daniel climbed into the back of the armored SUV, pulling the shivering, unconscious girl onto his lap. As the engine roared to life, he saw something on her wrist, a plastic tag, like the kind they put on morgue bodies or livestock. He ripped it off and held it up to the dome light. It read, "Property of Genesis Labs, Subject 07. Daniel crushed the tag in his hand. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. The journey back to the Sterling estate took 40 minutes. For Daniel, it felt like 40 years. He had cranked the heat in the back of the SUV to the maximum, but the girl, Subject 07, he refused to call her that, wasn't warming up fast enough. He had stripped the wet gown off her to maximize skin-to-skin contact, wrapping both of them in the emergency thermal blankets. His alpha body radiated heat like a furnace, usually enough to keep a pack warm in a blizzard. But she was a black hole of cold. "Drive faster," Daniel growled toward the front seat. "I'm doing 80 on black ice, Alpha," Theron shot back, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "If I go faster, we're all dead." Daniel looked down at her face. Now that they were out of the harsh wind, he could see her features clearly. She was striking, high cheekbones, a delicate jaw, and eyelashes so pale they were almost invisible. But there were scars. Old ones. Cigarette burns on her shoulder. Thin white lines on her wrists. His wolf growled low in his throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated protectiveness. He brushed a wet strand of hair from her forehead. "Who did this to you?" he whispered. Suddenly she gasped. It wasn't a gentle waking. It was a violent, terrified intake of air, like a drowning victim surfacing. Her back arched off his lap, her eyes snapping open. They were violet. Not blue, not grey, a distinct, piercing violet. She screamed. It was a raw, broken sound that tore at Daniel's eardrums. She thrashed, her limbs flailing, hitting his chest and face. "Easy! You're safe!" Daniel barked, trying to pin her arms without hurting her. "Look at me!" She didn't hear him. She was hallucinating, eyes wide with terror, seeing things that weren't there. "No! No more water! Please, no more water!" she shrieked, clawing at his tactical vest, breaking her nails. "I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." The words felt like a knife in Daniel's gut. "I'll be good." "Hey!" He grabbed her face between his large, rough hands, forcing her to look at him. He used his alpha command, not to dominate, but to ground. "Breathe!" The power of his voice hit her. She froze, her violet eyes locking onto his dark, almost black ones. She trembled violently, her teeth chattering so hard he worried they might crack. You're not him," she stammered, her voice raspy. "No," Daniel said firmly. "I'm Daniel. You were in the lake. I pulled you out." She blinked, the adrenaline fading, replaced by the crushing weight of hypothermia. She slumped back against him, her energy spent. "The lake," she whispered. "They said, if I survived the cold, I was worthy." Daniel stiffened. "Who said that?" Her eyes fluttered shut. The doctors, at Genesis. The SUV skidded to a halt in front of the massive stone lodge that served as the pack house. Daniel kicked the door open before the vehicle had fully stopped. "Get Dr. Harris," Daniel shouted as he carried her inside, bypassing the shocked pack members in the lounge. He kicked open the door to his private quarters, a space no one was allowed to enter. He laid her on his massive bed, surrounded by furs and the scent of pine and musk. Dr. Harris, the pack healer, rushed in moments later with a medical bag. She was an older woman, stern and unflappable. She took one look at the girl and paled. "Daniel, that is an albino. Do you know the legends? They say their blood is... If you finish that sentence with cursed or magic, I will throw you out the window," Daniel warned, his voice deadly calm. "Treat her. Now." Harris nodded quickly, getting to work. She checked vitals, set up a warm IV drip, and began applying warming salves to the girl's extremities. Daniel stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching every move like a hawk. He couldn't leave. He felt a physical tether to the girl on the bed. Hours passed. The sun began to rise over the snowy peaks outside, casting a grey light into the room. The girl stirred again. This time she didn't scream. She opened her violet eyes and scanned the room, landing on Daniel. She pulled the duvet up to her chin, hiding everything but those eyes. Daniel stepped forward slowly, hands raised to show he wasn't a threat. "I need a name," he said softly. "I can't keep calling you Subject 07. She flinched at the number. She looked down at her hands, watching the IV drip. "Ivy," she whispered. "My mother named me Ivy. Before they took me." "Ivy." Daniel tested the name. It was soft, resilient. It suited her. "I'm Daniel Sterling." "I know who you are," Ivy said, her voice gaining a tiny bit of strength. "The butcher." Daniel paused. "Is that what they told you?" "They told me you kill everything you touch," she said, looking at him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "So why didn't you kill me?" Daniel sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under his weight. He looked at her, really looked at her, and felt that strange pull again. It wasn't just the mating bond. It was something ancient. "Because, Ivy," Daniel said, leaning in, "I kill enemies. I don't kill survivors. And anyone who can survive that ice is someone I want on my side." Ivy swallowed hard. "You shouldn't have saved me, Daniel. They'll come looking. The Genesis labs. And the cross-pack." "Let them come," Daniel said, a dark smirk touching his lips. He reached out and touched a lock of her white hair. It was dry now, soft as silk. "I've been looking for a reason to burn Dominic Cross's empire down. I think I just found it." Before Ivy could respond, the heavy oak door to the bedroom burst open. Theron stood there, breathless, his face pale. "Alpha," Theron said urgently. "We have a problem. A convoy just pulled up to the perimeter gate. Heavy armor, black SUVs." Daniel stood up, his demeanor shifting instantly from protector to predator. "Who is it?" Theron swallowed. "It's Dominic Cross, and he says we have his property." Daniel looked back at Ivy. Her eyes were wide with terror. She tried to scramble out of bed, but the IV line caught. "Don't let him take me!" she cried, panic rising. "Please, just kill me! Don't let him take me back!" Daniel grabbed her shoulders, holding her steady. His eyes flashed gold, the color of his wolf. "Look at me," he commanded. "Nobody takes what is mine." He turned to Theron, his voice dropping to a low, lethal growl. "Gather the enforcers. Tell Dominic if he crosses the gate line, he leaves in a body bag." Daniel walked to the wall and pulled a heavy, serrated broadsword from its mount. He turned back to Ivy, who was trembling in the sheets. "Stay here," he said. "I'm going to go have a chat with your owner." The walk from the main lodge to the iron perimeter gates was a quarter-mile of paved stone, currently buried under 6 inches of fresh powder. Daniel Sterling walked it with a slow, deliberate cadence. He didn't rush. Rushing was a sign of fear, and Daniel wanted the man waiting on the other side to know he felt absolutely none. Around him, the Obsidian Pack's enforcers moved like shadows in the tree line. They were the elite guard, men and women trained to kill efficiently and quietly. Safety catches clicked off on assault rifles. Wolves shifted in the underbrush, their low growls vibrating through the frozen ground. Daniel reached the heavy wrought-iron gates. They remained closed. On the other side stood a convoy of 3 matte-black SUVs. The engines were idling, pumping white exhaust into the grey morning air. Standing in front of the lid vehicle was Dominic Cross. Dominic was the antithesis of Daniel. Where Daniel was rugged, scarred, and built like a mountain, Dominic was sleek. He wore a tailored cashmere coat over a charcoal suit, his hair gelled back perfectly despite the wind. He looked like a CEO, but his eyes were the colour of stagnant water, devoid of empathy. He held a lit cigarette, the cherry glowing bright against the monochrome landscape. "Daniel," Dominic called out, his voice smooth, carrying easily over the distance. "You look terrible. Roughly night?" Daniel stopped 10 feet from the gate. He didn't signal for it to be opened. "Get off my land, Dominic. You're trespassing." Dominic chuckled, flicking ash onto the snow. "Technically, I'm on the public access road. I know the boundaries of the Obsidian territory better than you do. I'm just here for a pickup. You found something in the lake. Something that belongs to me." "I found a girl," Daniel corrected, his voice flat. "Drowning. Freezing. Dying." "A girl?" Dominic raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "Oh, you mean Subject 007? Yes, I suppose she looks like a girl. But appearances can be deceiving, can't they? That little creature is a very expensive, very volatile piece of intellectual property belonging to Genesis Labs. I'm just the courier." Daniel felt his wolf ripple beneath his skin, urging him to tear the gate off its hinges and rip Dominic's throat out. He suppressed it. Violence now would endanger Ivy. He needed information. "Genesis Labs," Daniel repeated, testing the words. "I've heard rumors. Illegal experimentation, gene splicing, torture." Dominic sighed, looking bored. "Science, Daniel. It's called science. Progress requires sacrifice. That thing inside your house is a biological anomaly. An albino omega with a genetic sequence that could cure the feral degeneration disease. She isn't a person. She is a walking vaccine. And she is overdue for her extraction." Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. A vaccine. They weren't just hurting her. They were harvesting her. "She speaks," Daniel said, his voice dropping an octave. "She cries. She feels pain. That makes her a person. And under pack law, any refugee who crosses a territorial line and requests sanctuary is under the Alpha's protection." Dominic threw his cigarette down and crushed it with his polished Oxford shoe. The smile vanished. "Don't quote laws to me, Butcher. You think you're noble. You wiped out the Greymane pack 2 years ago. You're a killer, just like me. The only difference is I get paid better." Dominic took a step toward the gate, his hands in his pockets. "Hand her over, Daniel. If you don't, Genesis won't just send me. They'll send the containment unit. They will burn this forest to ash to get their asset back. Is she worth your pack? Is one broken, defective Omega worth the lives of your men?" Daniel stepped forward, wrapping his large hands around the iron bars of the gate. He squeezed. The metal groaned and bent under his grip. "You tell Genesis," Daniel snarled, his eyes flashing a brilliant, predatory gold, "that she is no longer Subject 007. She is under the protection of the Obsidian Pack, and if you or anyone from your lab sets 1 foot past this line again, I won't just kill you. I will hunt you down. I will find everyone you love, and I will make you watch while I end your bloodline." The silence that followed was heavy. The wind whistled through the bent iron. Dominic stared at Daniel for a long moment. He saw the madness in the Alpha's eyes, the absolute, unwavering resolve. Dominic was a businessman, and he calculated the odds. A fight today would result in heavy losses. "Very well," Dominic said softly. He turned back to the SUV, opening the door. He paused and looked back, a cruel smirk returning. "Keep her warm, Daniel. She has a dependency. Without her daily injections, her blood begins to boil. You haven't saved her. You've just changed the location of her funeral." Dominic slid into the car. The convoy reversed, tires spinning on the ice, and sped away down the mountain road. Daniel stood at the gate until the tail lights disappeared. His hands were shaking, not from cold, but from the effort of holding his wolf back. Her blood begins to boil. He turned and sprinted back toward the lodge. The bedroom was silent, save for the crackling of the fireplace Daniel had lit before he left. The massive room was steeped in shadow, the heavy velvet curtains drawn against the harsh daylight. When Daniel entered, he didn't slam the door. He closed it with agonizing slowness, engaging the heavy deadbolt. He took a moment to breathe, leaning his forehead against the wood. The smell of Dominic's cologne, expensive musk and stale tobacco, seemed to cling to his nose. He needed to clear it. He inhaled deeply, seeking the scent of the room: pine, wood smoke, and vanilla. He turned. The bed was empty. Panic flared in his chest, sharp and instant. "Ivy!" There was no answer. The duvet was thrown back, the IV pole knocked over, the saline bag dripping onto the Persian rug. "Ivy!" He moved quickly, checking the corners of the room. His bathroom door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open. The bathroom was a cavern of black marble and gold fixtures, usually a place of solitude for him. Now, it felt like a trap. Ivy was huddled in the far corner, squeezed between the porcelain tub and the wall. She had dragged the heavy fur blanket with her, wrapped tightly around her small frame. She was shaking so violently that her teeth clicked together in a rapid, rhythmic staccato. She held a jagged piece of glass in her hand, a shard from a shattered tumbler she must have knocked off the sink. She pointed it at him, her hand trembling. "Did you give me to him?" she gasped, her voice barely audible. "I heard the cars. I heard his voice." Daniel stopped in the doorway. He raised his hands, palms open. He felt like he was approaching a wounded deer that was ready to throw itself off a cliff to escape capture. "I didn't give you to anyone," Daniel said, his voice a low rumble designed to soothe. "I sent him away. He's gone, Ivy. The gate is locked. You are safe." "He never leaves," she whispered, tears spilling from her violet eyes. "He always comes back. He needs the samples." Daniel took a step forward. She flinched, pressing the glass against her own wrist, right over the pale blue veins. "Don't," Daniel commanded softly. "Please, put the glass down." "Why?" she cried out, a sudden burst of hysteria. "Why are you keeping me? What do you want? My blood? My marrow? Just take it. Just take it and let me sleep." The despair in her voice broke something inside Daniel. She didn't understand kindness because she had never experienced it. She viewed her existence solely as a transaction of pain for survival. He slowly lowered himself to his knees on the cold tile. He was now at her eye level. He didn't look like an alpha king. He looked like a man pleading. "I don't want your blood," Daniel said. "I want to get you warm. You're freezing again. Look at your fingers." She looked down, Her fingertips were turning blue. The adrenaline had worn off, and the hypothermia was creeping back in. The shard of glass slipped from her numb fingers and shattered on the floor. Daniel moved instantly. He scooped her up before she could collapse into the glass shards. She didn't fight him this time. Her body simply gave up. He carried her not to the bed, but to the deep, soaking tub. He sat her on the edge, keeping one arm around her waist to support her. With his free hand, he twisted the gold taps. Steaming water poured out, filling the room with mist. "I'm going to put you in the water," he narrated his actions, trying to give her a sense of control. "It's going to be hot. It might sting." She nodded weakly, her head resting against his chest. She was exhausted. Daniel reached for the hem of the tattered, dirty hospital gown she was still wearing. "I need to take this off, Ivy. It's filthy." She stiffened, her hands flying to cover herself. "No. The marks. You can't see the marks." "I don't care about the marks," Daniel lied. He cared. He wanted to see every single one so he could memorize the map of her pain and exact revenge for it. "I just want you clean." She slowly lowered her hands. Daniel peeled the wet grey fabric over her head and tossed it into the corner. When he saw her back, he stopped breathing. It wasn't just scars. It was a roadmap of torture. Along her spine, there were 6 circular metal ports, surgical implants embedded directly into her vertebrae. The skin around them was angry and red. These must be the injection sites Dominic mentioned. Her ribs were visible through her translucent skin, counting the days of starvation, and on her shoulder blade, branded into the flesh, was the barcode. Genesis. Daniel felt a tear slide down his own cheek. He hadn't cried since he was a boy. He quickly wiped it away before she could see. "Okay," he choked out, into the water. He lowered her into the steaming tub. She hissed as the heat hit her frozen skin, but then a long, shuddering sigh escaped her lips. The water turned slightly grey as the dirt and dried blood washed away. Daniel rolled up the sleeves of his dress shirt. He grabbed a soft sponge and a bar of unscented soap. He knelt beside the tub and began to wash her. It was a slow, reverent process. He washed her arm, running the sponge over the thin wrist. He washed her neck, careful of the bruising there. He washed her back, navigating around the metal ports with the precision of a surgeon. "What are these?" he asked quietly, touching the metal near her spine. "Valves," Ivy murmured, her eyes closed, the heat finally penetrating her bones. "For the serum, they pump it directly into the spinal fluid. If they don't, the fire starts." "The fire?" "The heat," she clarified. "My blood gets hot. It feels like burning from the inside out. They said I was made wrong, that the serum fixes me." Daniel gritted his teeth. Lies. They had engineered a dependency to keep her compliant. They made her sick so they could sell her the cure. "We will figure it out," Daniel promised. "My doctors are the best. We will get those things out of you." He moved to her hair. He poured warm water over the white strands, watching them fan out like sea silk. He applied shampoo, massaging her scalp. She leaned into his touch, a low, unconscious purr vibrating in her throat. It was a wolf sound, a sound of comfort. "Daniel?" she asked, her voice sounding younger, smaller. "I'm here. Why is your wolf so quiet?" she asked. "Usually, alphas want to hurt me. Their wolves want to dominate. But yours, he feels like a blanket." Daniel paused, his hand still in her hair. He looked at her face. The steam had put a little color into her cheeks. She looked ethereal, like a spirit of the lake. "My wolf knows what you are," Daniel said honestly. She opened her eyes, fear flickering. "A monster?" "No," Daniel said, leaning in until their foreheads almost touched. "A mate." The word hung in the humid air. Ivy's breath hitched. She pulled back slightly, searching his face for the lie. But there was no deception in Daniel's eyes, only a terrifying intensity. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I'm broken. Alphas don't mate with lab rats." "You aren't a rat," Daniel said fiercely. "And you aren't broken. You're frozen. And I'm going to be the one to thaw you out." He rinsed her hair, the water cascading down. He pulled the plug and wrapped her in a massive plush towel before the cold air could touch her. He lifted her out of the tub, carrying her back to the bedroom. He laid her on the bed, tucking the duvet around her tight. She looked tiny in the middle of his king-sized mattress. "Sleep," he ordered. "I'll be in the chair right next to you. I won't leave." Ivy watched him as her eyelids grew heavy. The warmth of the bath, the safety of the room, and the shocking confession of the bond were pulling her under. "Daniel." "Yeah?" "My back hurts," she mumbled, drifting off. "The fire is starting." Daniel froze. He looked at the clock. It had been 4 hours since he pulled her from the ice. Dominic said she needed daily injections. He walked over to her, pulling the blanket down slightly to touch her forehead. It was burning hot. Not a fever. It was radiating heat like a stovetop. The withdrawal was starting, and Daniel didn't have the serum. He grabbed his phone and dialed Dr. Aris. "Get up here," he barked into the phone. "She's burning up. And Aris, bring the surgical kit. We might have to cut something out." He hung up and looked down at Ivy. She was twisting in her sleep, whimpering. The peaceful interlude was over. The fight for her life was just beginning. The air in the master bedroom had changed. It no longer smelled of pine and crisp winter wind. It smelled of ozone, copper, and something terrifyingly sweet, like scorching sugar. Ivy was burning. She lay in the center of the bed, her back arched in a bow of agony. Her skin, once the color of moonlight, was now flushed with a violent, unnatural crimson. The veins beneath her translucent flesh were no longer blue. They were throbbing with a dark, molten red, visible from across the room. "Hold her legs," Dr. Aris shouted, her usual calm demeanor cracking. "She's going to break a bone if she keeps thrashing." Daniel didn't hesitate. He moved to the foot of the bed, pressing his weight down on Ivy's shins. Her skin was searing hot to the touch, like grabbing a kettle off a stove. It burned his palms, but he didn't let go. "What is happening to her, Oris?" Daniel roared, his voice shaking the walls. "Fix it!" Dr. Aris was working frantically at Ivy's back. She had set up a sterile field on the nightstand, metal instruments glinting in the lamplight. She held a syringe, trying to draw fluid from one of the metal ports embedded in Ivy's spine. "I can't just fix this, Daniel," Oris snapped back, sweat beading on her forehead. "This isn't a fever. It's a chemical chain reaction. Look at the readout." She pointed to the portable monitor. Ivy's heart rate was 180. Her body temperature was 106 degrees and climbing. "These ports," Aris explained, her voice trembling slightly as she examined the metal valve fused to Ivy's L3 vertebra. "They aren't just for injection. They are regulators. Whatever they were pumping into her, it was suppressing her biology. It was keeping her metabolism dormant. Now that the drug is gone, her body is waking up all at once. Her cells are metabolizing energy faster than she can handle. She is literally cooking herself alive." Ivy screamed. It wasn't a human scream. It was the cry of a wounded animal, high-pitched and vibrating with raw suffering. Her eyes snapped open, but the violet irises were gone, swallowed by fully dilated pupils that looked like black voids. "Make it stop!" she shrieked, clawing at the sheets, ripping the expensive Egyptian cotton to shreds. "The white room! Don't put me in the white room! It burns!" Daniel abandoned her legs. He crawled up the bed, positioning himself over her, pinning her shoulders to the mattress. He needed to ground her. He needed to reach her through the hallucination. "Ivy!" He brought his face inches from hers. "You aren't in the White Room. You are with me. You are with Daniel." She didn't see him. She saw ghosts. "Please, Dr. Cross," she begged, looking right through Daniel. "I'll be quiet. I won't howl. Please don't use the shock stick. Please." The name Dr. Cross ignited a cold, black rage in Daniel's gut. Dominic wasn't just a courier. He was the architect of this torture. "Aris," Daniel growled, not looking away from Ivy's terrified eyes. "Can we take the ports out? If I try to remove them now, while her blood pressure is this high, she'll bleed out in seconds," Aris said grimly. "They are fused to the spinal column. I need to stabilize her first. I need that serum, Daniel, or at least the chemical formula so I can synthesize a counteragent." "We don't have the serum," Daniel said, his voice tight. "Then we have to cool her down manually," Aris said, grabbing a scalpel. "I'm going to have to drain some of the pressure. It's going to be messy." "Do it." Aris made a small incision near the base of the lowest port. The blood that welled up wasn't normal. It was dark, thick, and it hissed when it touched the air. Steam rose from the wound. Ivy convulsed, her back arching off the mattress with supernatural strength. She threw Daniel off her, a feat that should have been impossible for a malnourished Omega against an Alpha King. She scrambled backward against the headboard, panting, blood trickling down her back. "Get away!" she hissed. But then her gaze locked onto Daniel again. Her breathing hitched. The wildness faded for a split second, replaced by clarity. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice wrecked. "You have to kill me." Daniel froze. "No, you don't understand," she wept, rocking back and forth. "I'm not just an Omega. I'm a weapon. If the fever breaks, if I survive the heat, I won't be Ivy anymore. I'll turn into something else. That's why they kept me frozen. That's why they drugged me." She reached out, grabbing Daniel's hand with her burning fingers. "Kill me before I hurt you," she pleaded. "Please. It's the only kindness you can give me." Daniel looked at her hand in his. He felt the heat, the power, the terrifying potential simmering under her skin. He didn't see a monster. He saw a woman who had been told she was a monster for so long she finally believed it. He brought her burning hand to his lips and kissed the knuckles. "I don't kill survivors, Ivy," he repeated his promise from the lake. "And I don't kill my mate." He turned to Oris. "Pack her in ice. Every bag we have in the industrial freezers. Keep her temperature under 108. Do whatever you have to do to keep her heart beating." "Where are you going?" Aris asked, applying a pressure bandage to the incision. Daniel stood up. He walked to the wardrobe and pulled out his tactical vest. He strapped a Glock 19 to his thigh and slid 2 combat knives into his boots. He grabbed the heavy assault rifle from the corner. When he turned back, his face was a mask of stone. The lover was gone. The butcher had returned. "She needs the serum," Daniel said, racking the slide of the rifle. "So I'm going to go ask Dominic for the recipe." The war room of the Obsidian Pack was a bunker, buried 3 stories beneath the lodge. It was a place of cold concrete, fluorescent lights, and violence. Daniel descended the stairs, the heavy thud of his boots echoing like a drumbeat. Theron was already there, standing over a holographic map of the valley. 10 of the pack's best enforcers stood along the wall, geared up in black tactical armor, faces painted with camo grease. They stopped talking when Daniel entered. The air in the room grew heavy with alpha pressure. "Status," Daniel demanded, walking to the table. Theron pointed to a red dot on the map. deep in the mountains of Sector 4. We tracked Dominic's convoy. They didn't go back to the city. They went here, the old iron mine. Daniel studied the map. The iron mine was a relic from the 1950s, abandoned decades ago. It was a labyrinth of tunnels and underground chambers, perfect for hiding things you didn't want the world to see. Genesis Labs, Daniel muttered. It's been under our noses the whole time. It's a fortress, Alpha, Theron warned, tapping the screen. Thermal imaging shows heat signatures for at least 50 guards, automated turrets at the entrance, and something else. What? Large heat signatures in the lower levels, Theron said, looking uneasy. Too big for humans. Too big for normal wolves. They have other experiments down there. Daniel didn't care if they had dragons down there. He could still feel the phantom heat of Ivy's skin on his palms. Every second they wasted talking, her blood was boiling closer to the point of no return. We aren't doing a siege, Daniel said, his voice low and dangerous. A siege takes time. We don't have time. So, a stealth extraction? One of the enforcers suggested. No, Daniel said. He looked up, his eyes flashing gold. We're going to knock on the front door. He traced a line from the entrance of the mine to the lower levels. Theron, you take Team B and blow the ventilation shafts on the north ridge. Flush them out. Create chaos. Make them think an army is attacking from the top. And you? Theron asked. I'm taking Team A through the main cargo elevator, Daniel said. I'm going straight to the bottom, to the lab. That's suicide, Theron argued. That's a fatal funnel. They'll mow you down. Daniel picked up a combat axe from the table, testing its weight. They can try. The drive to the mine was silent. The snow had started falling again, thick, heavy flakes that obscured the windshields of the armored convoy. Daniel sat in the passenger seat of the lead truck, watching the trees blur past. He wasn't thinking about the strategy anymore. He was thinking about the barcode on Ivy's shoulder. Subject 7. How many others were there? 001 through 06? Were they dead? Or were they the large heat signatures Theron had seen? The convoy killed its lights as they approached the base of the mountain. They parked a mile out, proceeding on foot through the snow-choked forest. The entrance to the mine was a gaping maw in the rock face, sealed by massive steel blast doors. Floodlights swept the snow, and armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Team B in position. Theron's voice crackled over the comms earpiece. Light it up, Daniel whispered. Boom! A massive explosion rocked the north ridge, a mile above the entrance. Fireballs rolled into the sky. The alarm sirens at the mine entrance began to scream. The guards at the gate panicked, shouting into their radios, looking up at the smoke. Move, Daniel commanded. He broke from the tree line, moving with unnatural speed. He was a blur of black shadow against the white snow. The first guard didn't even see him. Daniel tackled him, the momentum carrying them both into the snow. A quick, brutal snap of the neck, and the guard was down. The second guard turned, raising his rifle. Contact! Front! Daniel threw a knife. It took the man in the throat. Breach! Daniel shouted to his team. The enforcers swarmed the blast doors. One of them slapped a C4 charge on the hinges. Click! Boom! The steel doors groaned and fell inward with a deafening crash of metal and dust. Daniel walked through the smoke, stepping over the twisted metal. He was inside. The interior of the mine had been transformed. The rough rock walls were lined with sleek white panels and harsh LED strip lighting. It looked like a hospital built inside a cave. Klaxons blared. Red emergency lights spun. A squad of Genesis security personnel came running down the hallway, armored and carrying shock batons and submachine guns. Halt! The lead guard screamed. Drop your weapons! Daniel didn't slow down. He didn't take cover. He let his wolf rise to the surface, his muscles swelling, his canines extending. He roared. It wasn't a word. It was a physical force, an alpha roar that triggered the primal fear instinct in every living thing within 100 yards. The guards hesitated. That was their mistake. Daniel moved like a wrecking ball. He blocked a baton strike with his forearm, ignoring the crackle of electricity, and punched the guard through the drywall. He grabbed another by the tactical vest and hurled him into his squad mates. Gunfire erupted. Bullets sparked off Daniel's armor and grazed his arms, but he felt no pain. He was fueled by a singular, consuming purpose. Get the serum. Save the girl. He fought his way deeper, leaving a trail of broken bodies and shattered glass. He reached the elevator banks. He ripped the control panel off the wall and hot-wired the lift, bypassing the security lockout. The doors slid open. Daniel stepped in, blood dripping from his knuckles onto the pristine white floor. Going down, he muttered to himself. The elevator descended rapidly, the numbers counting down. Level 1, Level 2, Level 5. When the doors opened on Level 5, the air was different. It was freezing cold. Daniel stepped out into a massive observation deck, and then he stopped. In front of him was a wall of glass, looking into a giant cryo chamber. But it wasn't empty. Rows and rows of glass tanks lined the room. Inside each one, suspended in blue liquid, were wolves. But they were wrong. Some had extra limbs. Some had exposed machinery fused to their skulls. Some were enormous, hulking monstrosities of muscle and fur. And in the center of the room, standing in a white lab coat, holding a clipboard, was Dominic Cross. He looked up as Daniel entered, showing no fear, only mild annoyance. He tapped the glass of the tank next to him. Inside floated a massive, grey beast with metal claws. "You're late, Daniel," Dominic said, his voice amplified by the room's intercom. "Subject 04 is getting restless. He smells you." Dominic pressed a red button on the console. The glass of the tank shattered. A wave of liquid crashed onto the floor, and the grey beast, Subject 04, landed on all fours, shaking itself dry. It stood 7 feet tall at the shoulder, its eyes glowing with a chemically induced madness. "You want the serum for your little girl, friend?" Dominic asked, backing away toward a secure door. "Kill him and maybe I'll give it to you." The beast turned its head, locking on to Daniel. It let out a sound that was half growl, half mechanical whir. Daniel dropped his rifle. He rolled his neck, his bones cracking. He didn't shift into his wolf form. He raised his fists. "Come on then, ugly," Daniel growled. "Daddy's in a bad mood." The beast lunged, a blur of grey fur and chrome. Subject 04 hit Daniel with the force of a freight train, driving him back into the steel wall of the laboratory. Metal shrieked as the panels buckled. The creature's jaws snapped inches from Daniel's throat, saliva dripping onto his tactical vest. But Daniel didn't panic. He looked into the beast's eyes that were wide, rolling, and filled with confused agony. This wasn't a killer. It was a victim, maddened by the machinery fused to its skull. "I know," Daniel grunted, holding the snapping jaws back with his forearms. "It hurts." Daniel didn't shift. He didn't need claws to end this. He needed precision. With a roar of effort, Daniel drove his knee into the beast's solar plexus, creating a split second of separation. He didn't strike to maim. He moved inside the creature's guard, wrapping his arm around its thick neck in a chokehold. The wolf thrashed, slamming Daniel against the glass tanks, cracking them. Water and alarms filled the air, but Daniel squeezed tighter, cutting off the blood flow. "Sleep," Daniel whispered into the beast's ear. "Just sleep." The massive body went limp, sliding to the floor. Daniel didn't kill it. He rendered it unconscious. He stood up, wiping blood from his lip, and turned his gaze to the secure door where Dominic Cross stood frozen, his hand hovering over a pistol. "You didn't kill it," Dominic stammered, his composure shattering. "Why didn't you kill it?" Daniel walked forward, step by heavy step. "Because unlike you, Dominic, I know the difference between a monster and a weapon." Dominic drew his gun, but his hand was shaking. Before he could squeeze the trigger, Daniel was there. He grabbed the barrel of the gun and twisted. Dominic screamed as his trigger finger broke. Daniel backhanded him, sending the CEO sprawling across the slick floor. Daniel loomed over him, blocking out the harsh laboratory lights. He reached down and ripped the silver briefcase from Dominic's grip. He popped the latches. Inside, nestled in foam, were 6 vials of a clear, blue liquid. The serum. "Please," Dominic wheezed, clutching his hand. "We can make a deal. The patent alone is worth billions. We can be partners." Daniel looked at the vials, then back at Dominic. He leaned down, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. "Here is the deal. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to leave you here." Daniel glanced around the room. The explosion from Theron's diversion had cut the power to the magnetic locks. The other tanks, Subject 02, Subject 05, were beginning to hiss open. "The power is failing, Dominic," Daniel said, turning his back. "And your experiments are waking up. I suggest you start running." Daniel walked out of the lab as Dominic's screams began to echo behind him, joined by the sound of shattering glass and angry growls. The helicopter ride back to the Sterling estate was a blur. Daniel stared at the vial in his hand, praying to a god he hadn't believed in for years. When he burst into the master bedroom, the silence was deafening. Dr. Orris was sitting by the bed, her head in her hands. The ice packs were melted. Ivy lay motionless in the center of the ruin, her skin now a terrifying shade of grey. Her chest was barely moving. "Daniel!" Orris stood up, tears in her eyes. "She stopped breathing a minute ago. I revived her, but her heart is giving out." Daniel didn't speak. He vaulted over the bed. He uncapped the vial and loaded the syringe with practiced hands. He found the port on her spine, the metal ring surrounded by angry, burned flesh. He jammed the needle in and depressed the plunger. "Come back," he commanded, his voice cracking. He tossed the syringe aside and gathered her into his arms. She was burning hot, a furnace of fever. "Ivy, come back to me." For a long minute, nothing happened. The wind howled outside. The clock ticked. Then a gasp. Ivy's back arched. A tremor ripped through her body. The grey colour began to recede, replaced by a flush of pink. Her temperature plummeted so fast Daniel could feel the heat evaporating off her skin like steam. She slumped against his chest, limp and exhausted. Her eyelashes fluttered. Slowly, painfully, she opened her eyes. The black voids were gone. The violet was back, bright, clear, and alive. She looked up at him, her vision focusing on his scarred face. She reached up, her cool fingertips grazing his jaw. "You," she rasped, her voice weak but steady. "You came back." Daniel buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling the scent of vanilla and rain. The knot of fear in his chest finally unraveled. "I told you," Daniel whispered into her hair. "Nobody takes what is mine. Not Dominic. Not death." Ivy closed her eyes, a faint smile touching her lips. For the first time in her life, the cold wasn't a punishment, and the heat wasn't a fever. She was just warm. She was safe. "Okay," she whispered, her hand curling into his shirt. "I believe you." Outside, the snow continued to fall on Blackwood Ridge, covering the blood and the tracks, but inside, the fire in the hearth burned steady and bright, casting a golden light over the Alpha and the girl he had pulled from the ice. The war was coming, But for tonight, the winter was over. And that is the end of part 1 of Daniel and Ivy's story. From a frozen tomb beneath the lake to the burning depths of a secret laboratory, they survived the impossible. Daniel proved that being an alpha isn't about how many wars you win, but who you are willing to burn the world down to save. And Ivy proved that even the most broken among us can find the strength to survive if given a reason. They found their reason in each other. But with Dominic Cross's empire in ruins and Genesis Labs exposed, their fight is far from over. This was just the beginning of the Obsidian Pack's rise. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more dark romance sagas like this one. I have a question for you. If you were Daniel, would you have left Dominic to the wolves, or would you have finished him off yourself? Let me know your answer in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next story. I have a new tale about a rogue wolf and a billionaire heiress coming next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.